well, I don't know if you want to save that to the show, but the defenseman who was connected to Edmonton last year probably would be part of that deal, wouldn't you think?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
In their quest to be more veteran and stable, and the Flyers' quest to be more mobile.
Yeah, this is something. We are live now.
Mm-hmm. That's why I was speaking in code.
That's okay. That's good. Yep. All right. So let me put out that we're live on this as well.
As a Buffalonian, I am proud to say that I paid the first installment of my Sabres season tickets.
Nice.
Yes. If they wanted to offer me a discount as a member of the media, they could feel free to do that. But
You have to pay more because you're part of the media.
right.
Okay, let's see. Oh man, too many things at once. This is why we need to predict. It'd be nice to have like this. There's times like this that I would like to have like somebody running the show besides me, but that will never happen. Well, not never, but not for a really long time. I guess. All right, so let's see. What am I doing? Okay, I got to post this out now. All right, I am tweeting this out that we are live.
Okay.
Make sure to mute your things, man. You've been having things pop up lately.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. No, it happens to me all the time, so I'm not going to talk.
Yeah, the funny thing was like because I was setting up. Josh says he can't get in. Send him another invitation. Because I was setting up the blog, the separate podcast blog, and then once we got into the show, I forgot to shut the window, and then obviously it started playing in the background.
Yeah. Yeah, look out for this one. All right. So, guys, how you doing? Sorry if you're just joining us. We're about to start. We're waiting for Josh Rimmer. I'm sending another invite to him now, and then we will definitely get started. Lots going on today, obviously. Buzz just knocked over like an entire pile of things over there. Good job, Buzz.
Yeah, the thing that you mentioned in a column a few days ago about basically like one deal being the domino for many others. I mean, I don't think that Umberger and Hartnell is a blockbuster.
No,
But
it just gets people thinking that something's up.
I think it's like I think that everybody is predisposed to making making moves, especially with the landscape the way it is with the salary cap and a few other things.
Oh yeah.
And this deal could be the start of things. So it's going to be. I'll hesitate saying the I word.
Yeah. No, it's not that interesting. All right, so we don't have Josh yet, but we will.
I told him to restart his computer, and you'd send him another invite. So
I will send him another invite. So yeah, this could be Justin Schultz. Could be Justin Schultz coming to the Flyers. That was what my text message just said for the Edmonton Oilers. And it could be Braden Coburn going the other way. I don't know that for a fact. Of course, this is all sort of happening as we sit here. That's my bell. My bell accidentally.
And we've had another coach hired.
We do. Someone's saying our video quality is not good today. I don't know why that would be. We're looking okay here.
Yeah, I'm plugged in like I'm normally plugged in.
I heard Google was having issues today, so hopefully. Look out here. Okay, so I'm going to say, I'm just going to tweet out because people are freaking out about this. Justin Schultz. How do we spell Schultz? Justin Schultz name. Justin Schultz is.
And we have a Curtis McElhaney signing.
Ooh. Lead with that. We have a Josh sighting.
Really?
Hey, Josh.
Hey, there he is.
Unbelievable. I was going to throw my computer out the window.
Yeah, but it'll stop working then.
I know. Remember that show Office Space, or that movie Office Space?
Oh, yeah.
Where they took a baseball bat to the printer? I almost did that to my computer.
Good stuff.
We start the show yet?
We're starting it now.
We're starting. We're live, but we're not starting, or haven't started.
Oh, I love this. I love this Blue Jackets deal.
Oh man, we're gonna talk about that right away. All right, let's go.
Yeah.
You should love this Blue Jackets deal. All right, here we go. Here we go.
I don't know what the Flyers are thinking, to be honest.
Well, Monday, June 23rd.
Right. All right, guys, we have 154 of you watching. Thank you
I
very
don't
much.
look all sweaty, do I?
Yeah, 154 people watching Josh sweat live.
This is my third shirt today, by the way.
Just dropped my favorite tablet, my Nexus tablet, and busted the screen. Unbelievable. Idiot.
Really?
Yep. Just fell off my table and landed right on something hard. All right. That's okay. It's all good. All right. So here we go. Hey, Hockey World. It is Monday, June 23rd, 2014.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Josh Rimmer.
Trying something there, Josh? And I am Ashton. And you're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com on this, the week of the trade deadline that we call the draft. which has become like, the trade deadline 2, or actually in some people's minds, trade deadline 1, the better trade deadline in a lot of ways.
And the awards tonight. Don't forget the awards tonight.
It's like a 2-week trade deadline because there's nothing saying that there's not going to be deals after the draft or up to July 1st. So this is going to be beautiful.
Right, exactly, and that's not so bad. So we've already started today with a really interesting trade, and if we're going to try to do this without being distracted, because other things seem to be happening as we speak. And there's Kevin Allen. Hello, Kevin.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, I'm a little late. There was a little bit of a trade that was made here in the last few minutes that I had to type up, so I'm sure you guys have all analyzed it.
We just started the show. We haven't started talking about it yet.
All right, sounds good.
So let's do this.
We were dominated by the Curtis McElhaney signing there, Kevin.
Yeah, I could see where that would tie you up.
It would take up a lot of your time, right? All right, so starting here, Josh, I like your hat. All right, we're going to start here. The Flyers have traded Scotty Hartnell to the Columbus Blue Jackets for R.J. Umberger and a 4th-round draft pick. Not exactly a blockbuster, but still a big trade, to launch into our what I call the trade deadline, aka the draft week. So this is going to be this starts off right away, and I'm going to start talking about this because I know a little bit about these guys. And I am not a fan of this trade right off the bat. As from a Philadelphia perspective, I think the Flyers got fleeced. I'm not going to say that in any other way. I mean, there's definitely been some issues here. What this is, no question, is a cultural shift for both of these teams, because you're talking about two players who are very popular, or big parts of their locker room, I would say. Maybe popular by some. Two very, polarizing figures in their locker rooms, maybe is a better way to put it. But, that have been, this has been going on for a while. In Philly, there's been an obvious issue between Craig Berube and Scotty Hartnell since before Berube was even head coach. He was not a big fan of Hartnell's, so we would hear that a lot. He thought Hartnell dogged it on some nights and, just didn't pick up his game, and Hartnell's had his ups and downs in Philly, but has always been a very popular player here in the city, and a popular player among his teammates as well. So Contrast that to R.J. Umberger, who is not, who has a reputation of not being the greatest teammate. That's a little bit not. Maybe that's a little bit unfair to say, but that was the reaction I had from 4 or 5 players who texted me right after this deal. Why would you trade one guy who's really popular for a guy who's not very popular among his teammates? That was right away. So I mean, R.J. though was a Flyer, was definitely an interesting. At the time the Flyers picked him up, remember he picked him up because he couldn't sign a deal. He had gone a year without negotiating a contract, I think with Pittsburgh, where he's from, and so now here we end up in this whole craziness. The one interesting side note about R.J. Umberger in Philadelphia is the Flyers, in order to make him fit under the cap space, traded Patrick Sharp away, which was one of the worst trades in Flyers history. To keep R.J. here, they traded Patrick Sharp for a player who never played a game, I don't think, in the Flyers organization, and Patrick Sharp and a couple other people too for that player. So that's a famous trade, and that is an R.J. Umberger connection to Philly. This is definitely not unlike the Flyers to bring back former players. Rick McLeish can't be far behind, and I don't know. I'm not quite sure. That's my initial reaction.
Mike Richards?
Mike Richards, no, but yeah, probably not. But still,
yeah.
This is I was looking for Hextall to make some moves, and there's another rumor that I want to throw out there too, that's circulating among the people I've been talking to, at least some of the players, that the Flyers and the Oilers are working on a deal which could come down momentarily as well, that would send Justin Schultz to the Flyers. Now, I don't know. This is just players talking, and I don't know if this is something that Hartnell might have said to some guys. Yeah, there's another trade coming, but that's sort of what it sounds like to me. So that could involve, there have been lots of speculation and not just speculation, but actually fact that Braden Coburn was almost dealt to the Oilers last year. So maybe that has something to do with that. Josh, why don't we go to you for your Columbus review on this, and then we'll get Kevin and Mike's take.
2 things. Number one, I love this trade for the Columbus Blue Jackets. This is the kind of player that they could have used in the playoffs. Not only is he known for a little bit of toughness, but he can also score some big goals. I've always been a big fan of Scotty Hartnell. I'm actually shocked that they traded him. And I thought him and Giroux, have had great chemistry over the last couple of years. And I just can't – I don't understand it myself. Number 2, if you think Justin Schultz is going to the Philadelphia Flyers, I would not be surprised if the Oilers are talking to Toronto in regards to Dion Phaneuf again. Because if you're dealing Justin Schultz, obviously the Oilers are up to something where they're going to bring in, a top defenseman to eat up some minutes. I think it's going to be a busy week as well, Eklund.
And there's more to that. One more thing to this is interesting is the rumors. I know for a fact that the Blue Jackets had really strong interest in Ryan Kessler. And there was all this talk before, that Umberger and Kessler, have this long-running feud and it wouldn't work out being on the same team. So this also intrigues me as well, that Umberger's been moved out. Kevin, your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think this is a great trade for the Blue Jackets right off the bat. I did not understand it at all from the Flyers' perspective. I mean, you're trading away a guy who is very difficult to play against in the playoffs, and that's what it's all about. And I think there's surprise around the league. I was looking for some sort of a hidden reason. I went and looked up their salaries. Are there some issues there? And, was it a cap situation? But, essentially they're making the same amount of money, a little bit more for Hartnell, but he's got a little bit longer term. But you're basically, trading a very hard-edged 100 penalty minute scorer for a scorer who's, was out of the lineup down the stretch, was a healthy scratch for a few games. And, I remember the explanation that Todd Richards gave was I wanted to make my lineup a little quicker. Well, that's not a type of player that the Flyers are usually interested in acquiring. But, Kekalainen has done a great job of changing the culture there, and this is one more guy that, is sort of built for the postseason. So I think it's a very good trade for the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It is definitely a culture change, and it's also a guy in a market like Columbus, a really popular fan type player. Fans just get into Hartnell. I'm there with Wigs in Philly. There's this Hartnell Down charity that he does. Hartnell is one of these guys that a team like Columbus, who's sort of it has sort of an indescript nature to them. They're getting some script or descript. They're getting some descript now. Yeah. So, Mike, your thoughts?
Make it 4 for 4. I don't understand this deal. I mean, there have been reports and rumors that Umberger was being considered for a compliance buyout by Columbus based on whether they were going to be able to get anything for him, and if anything, they might have to eat some salary here. They get a player who's making about the same amount of money, and as Kevin said, he's under term for 2 years longer. Hartnell had a bad beginning of the year last year and ended up scoring 20 goals and 32 assists. Yeah. So, and I know he had a bad year the previous year during the lockout. I think he only had like 8 goals. But he's a quality forward, a veteran forward, a guy who's a leader. I mean, he's a type of ad that a lot of teams would like to add. I don't understand an Umberger. I don't know how much he has left in the tank. I don't know where he fits with the Flyers. His speed is going down. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
I mean, could the Flyers be buying out Umberger? I mean, I know they don't have any compliance buyouts, but I don't. That still doesn't make. I'm trying to look for an angle too, Kevin. I don't know. I can't think of.
I mean, they're essentially, when you look at their age and their contract, they're the same player, except at this stage of their careers, Hartnell is infinitely more desirable.
Yeah.
Because and not only for the fact that he's he's tough in the playoffs and so forth, but you mentioned he's just a good personality for a market that's still trying to sell tickets.
Yeah, and that's a big deal. And Philly doesn't have to sell tickets. There's a lot of pressure around Philly in the last week or so to make some big splashes around the draft. This is definitely a setup trade in my mind. This is a typical Flyers setup trade, but usually in the setup trades there's some other reason, like maybe some other team wants R.J. Umberger, but I don't think that's happening here. I don't quite get it. I mean, also the one thing is that there was definitely a bit of a logjam last year as Wayne Simmons picked up his game, and Flyers I think see Simmons and Hartnell as sort of the same player. Filling the same roles, but you can never have enough power forwards, who can go to the net and do that kind of thing. I mean, they just don't exist that much in the NHL anymore. So, yeah.
It's hard to see it as a setup trade because there's, essentially they're getting the same salary back, the same age back, and, moving Umberger is not, moving Hartnell would have been a lot easier than moving Umberger.
Yeah. To take the buyout question. Umberger, according to our friends at Cap Geek, Umberger, if he was bought out, would be a $1.6 million cap hit, going down to $1.5 million cap hit over 6 years. But this is a regular buyout, not a compliance buyout.
Yeah, it's a regular buyout.
Hartnell would be a 10-year buyout at $1.25 million. So, it would be a shorter buyout because of the 3 years left in Umberger's term. But the difference in money is.
I'll say this. Yeah, for over the years, I've been several times, and I talked to a friend earlier this morning in L.A. right after this happened, not too long ago actually, who basically said, that Hextall when he was in L.A. was also an Umberger fan, and there were times when he was pushing Lombardi to try to make a deal for Umberger. So and I think Berube's an Umberger fan, and Berube's definitely not a Hartnell fan. So, I mean, there was one time when Berube came in, I'll never forget this, we were all sort of hanging out, and media was hanging out, and Berube was there. This is when Berube was still an assistant coach, came in and just blatantly was loud about his displeasure, which is rare that you see an assistant coach just basically go off, like this is an off-the-record type thing at the time, He said some things, and it was just obvious that those guys weren't on the same page. So, maybe Hextall talked to Craig and said, what do we have to do here to make this happen? So I guess, but at the same time, Hartnell has been a streaky scorer. His chemistry with Giroux is iffy. Josh, I wouldn't say they had great chemistry. They didn't have terrible chemistry. They did play together a lot. But yeah, he's not the kind of guy who I would expect this from. So we start there. And now here we are.
Yeah, maybe we're missing the obvious here, though. I mean, when you're talking about Hextall, maybe they just believe that surrounded or given a talented center like Giroux, that Umberger could, be a 30-goal scorer. I mean, maybe their pro scouts are saying, he can do more and he will do more given the right environment. I mean, that wouldn't be the first trade that was made like that.
Yeah. And it can't be the reason for the trade can't be to open up cap room for a guy like a restricted free agent like Braden Shen, because the cap hits are equivalent. So
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't. It's definitely not that kind of a move. The Flyers will. I wouldn't be surprised, though. I'll tell you this: I would not be surprised at all to see another trade happen after this, because this is not going to be a popular trade here in Philly. I haven't really gotten a chance to turn on the radio station yet and gauge, if they're still talking about the Eagles' water bottle, choices or not. And they've actually decided that this might take precedence over, where the Eagles are going to practice in 2084. But this is, to me, this is one of those. I know it's not going to be a popular trade among Flyers fans. It already isn't, and I think that the Flyers will then have to turn around, and there might be something else up. The Flyers, remember, they traded Carter and Richards together at the same time, within like a couple minutes of each other. So they tend to do these unpopular things together. I don't know who, if Coburn's the next guy out. Another guy, though, that Craig Ruby doesn't like would be Coburn, I would say. So, there's that. And this also goes in, like you were saying, Josh. I mean, the Dion Phaneuf rumors are still flying around here in Philly as well, as they are in Edmonton. And I heard, Colorado mentioned today with Dion Phaneuf too. There's a lot of options for Phaneuf right now.
Well, I heard yesterday. I mean, this is a rumor, of course, that the Oilers might be willing to move their third pick to Toronto for their 8th pick and Dion Phaneuf. I don't know if there's any legs to it at all, but I know that that was making the rounds last night. At least I heard that as a rumor.
Mm-hmm.
Would you do that, Kevin?
That's a great question. I was just trying to analyze that. I think you can do better for Phaneuf. I mean, unless you're totally sold on the top of this draft and you believe that who you're going to get to Stan Bennett is the end all, I feel you can do better on that on Phaneuf. I'm not a huge Phaneuf guy. Like I understand his value. He is a big, strong guy with a huge shot, but I don't think he's strong enough defensively. He's never really, in my opinion, reached to the upper level of expectation that we've had for him. So, I can see why some teams would want him. It makes some sense, obviously, to bring him in. But I thought he was part of the problem, not the solution at Toronto. So, if you move him in and you bring him into your defense, you got to expect that, your goals against might go up. I don't think he's a great defensive player.
Can't go up much more than Edmonton's has, but
that's true. I mean, that's true.
Well, a number of factors here with Phaneuf in connection to Edmonton. He's from Edmonton. He's locked up on the 7-year deal, and we know for a fact, based on previous situations, that not a lot of players want to play for the Oilers. Or they have trouble getting players to agree to long-term deals. They've locked up a lot of their young kids that they drafted, Taylor Hall and Eberle and Nugent Hopkins, but getting free agents to come there has always been a problem. They bid more for David Clarkson than the Maple Leafs did, and Clarkson went to Toronto instead. But with Phaneuf, I think, I'll stop short here because Josh has some breaking news. Go ahead, Josh.
Yes, just want to point out, since we are talking about defensemen, Matt Green appears he will be staying in Los Angeles as he is finishing up work on a 4-year deal with the LA Kings. Mm-hmm. That's according to Darren Dreger. So a defenseman off the market, it appears.
And which just makes a player like Phaneuf, even though Green is a defensive defenseman and not a top pairing guy, but this is one more guy off the list. And I think players like Phaneuf, there is a market out there because there are so few really quality defensemen out there. I mean, Edmonton makes sense. I don't know about the 8 and Phaneuf for the number 3. I know that George Richards from the Miami Herald this morning was reporting quotes from Dale Talon saying that they have a serious offer for the number 1 pick, and in a deal they would only swap going as low as number 8 in the first round. Who's number 8?
Right.
Yeah. I think there's more of a possibility of Phaneuf or Nazem Kadri and the number 8 going to Florida for the number 1, than a deal for the number 3. I think if they trade Phaneuf, they would prefer to get a replacement right away, and that would be Aaron Ekblad. But we'll see.
Yeah, you would think that. I would just I'd love to be, a fly on the wall and figure out how Dale Talon could possibly handle I can't organize 10 of my friends to get together for a party. I'm trying to think of how he's actually going to put this together. I mean, with all the calls and all the different options he seems to have out there. I mean, I guess the decision first is, are we going to do this? But then you always have to listen. So
it's called a spreadsheet, Ak.
Yeah, it's a spreadsheet, but I have plenty of them. But I think that it's more than that. You're dealing with a lot of different kinds of personalities. You're dealing with some people you feel more comfortable talking to than others. It's very interesting for GMs. I've talked to a few of them on how they they all have their friends. It's the reason we see some teams make trades with other teams more often, because they feel comfortable with them. They feel like they're not going to be fleeced. And we'll see if the Blue Jackets and Flyers do another trade in the near future. No, just kidding. They're on that one. But Milan, Mikhailuk, Josh, what?
With Matt Green going or re-signing in LA, that's got to make Willie Mitchell obviously a UFA, and I'm sure there are teams that would be interested in his services, especially him coming back from a devastating injury and playing pretty well in the playoffs.
Yeah. I would agree with that. When I looked to assess their salary cap situation, I felt they could either have Green or Mitchell. They couldn't have both if they're going to sign Gaborik, which I still going to believe they're going to get that done. I mean, I think it would be just foolish for Gaborik to not try to get back there with the way he played there and getting the center. But one point I did want to bring up, I was on the conference call earlier today with Peter Chiarelli. And he made a real interesting point that he thinks some of the what's happening in the marketplace is and why there's so much aggressiveness is there's so many general managers who are new general managers who are trying to feel their way with how this process works. And he just pointed out that he's just noticed that there's just a lot more talk because these general managers, although experienced in some regard, these newer general managers, not in the fine art of how to get these deals done. As you mentioned, trying to Dale Talon sort out all these offers. So he thinks that that sort of changed the marketplace this time around as newer general managers try to sort through, the protocol of how to get a deal done.
That makes sense, and you look at Hextall as one of those newer general managers, who is even though he's been there, he's been behind, and it's interesting because the Hextall as a player and Hextall as a GM, they couldn't be more different to me than when you speak to them or around them, right? Hextall is very calm as a GM, very, You don't
have to worry about him chasing you with the hockey stick.
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen, right? But this is an aggressive move by Hextall. This is more of a Hextall the player type move.
Mm-hmm. Fans are going to chase him with a hockey stick.
Right. This is like Hextall was very much a go with your gut type player, and this is a go with your gut type move. This, like you said, Kevin, this is a gamble. Josh, did you just pass out there and fall to the floor?
Oh, my camera fell. My camera fell. Sorry, guys.
Well done.
The question is Kent Nielsen part of the Columbus Blue Jackets organization?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, here we are.
Well, the interesting thing here is what Claude Giroux thinks of his buddy Hartnell getting traded because they played pretty well together the last couple of years, and how about Flyers fans when they have their favorites, they seem to be traded out of Philly as well. I find that quite interesting, and I remember
this is definitely this is a more popular player than Carter or Richards were. So
well. In the playoff stack, I saw so many Hartnell jerseys in the crowd. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, he's been here a long time too. Remember, I mean, he's been here. I mean, he came here with Kimmo Timonen, way back now. It's what 7 or 8 years ago, which is in hockey is forever. Right.
Josh, this is the Philadelphia equivalent of the Wendell Clark deal. I mean, how that ripped the heart out of the Maple Leafs nation back in 94. Yeah.
Here's another question we haven't even addressed yet on this trade, and I think it's an important one. if they were going to trade Hartnell, couldn't they have done better?
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm going to trade Hartnell, it's an auction. I'm sending out letters to everyone saying, Scotty Hartnell, former 30-goal scorer, hard to play against in the playoffs, gritty guy, popular guy with his teammates. I'm going to trade him. Give me your best offer. I got to believe you could have done better than R.J. Umberger.
I'm with you on that 100%. And I know that there were lots of people scouting Hartnell last year that came through Philly. I talked to some scouts who were there from other teams. One that was there repeatedly was St. Louis. That was a team that that had serious interest, I think, in him. But every time they came, Hartnell really had one of his, it was as if Hartnell was tipped off and had just a really kind of a lackluster effort, which you would see from him from time to time. And that definitely, it's not completely surprising that they would move Hartnell. It's just surprising that they would move him for what they moved him for.
Which lends itself to the argument that they actually, they actually wanted Umberger, and it was more, a focused deal 1-for-1 than they were shopping him.
Yeah, but if you really wanted Umberger, you could have gotten Umberger for a whole lot less.
I agree. That's why I'm.
It's the money issue, right? So the money matches up here, but still, if you really want Umberger, you could have found a way.
When's the last time you saw a player want out of a city, and that team actually be the fleecers? Usually they're the fleecees. When teams know the player wants out and the team has to deal them, so they're going to lowball them. This was not a lowball offer by any stretch of the imagination.
Good point.
Yeah, the oddity of this too is that when Umberger, it wasn't that long ago, he was a candidate to be captain of the team. When you're talking about who should be captain, I remember him talking about either Umberger or Jack Johnson, and he was a guy in the room. He was a big guy, and then all of a sudden he sort of fell out of favor. And it doesn't take much in pro sports.
It doesn't.
You're on top, and the next thing you know, you're getting traded and being a healthy scratch.
Right, and it's interesting because here's another guy also that I always found him from a media perspective. R.J. Umberger was really a kind of a joy to deal with. He's a really nice guy. He's really straight ahead, and he seems like he would be the kind of guy that would be a great teammate. And yet, why did I have so many players text me and say, "Wow, they traded Umberger, who's so popular in the room, for a guy who's not a good teammate"? Part of this is also the reputation, what I call the NHL reputation of one, which is that there's always one thing that you're going to be tagged with, in the NHL. So someone's going to say, okay, he's a drinker, or he's this, or he's that, and whatever that is, R.J. Umberger, had the issue with Kessler or what have you, so he's not a great teammate. I mean, there's definitely issues, that one characteristic that follows you that you can't get rid of. So maybe it's a little unfair to R.J., but I don't know.
And remember, RJ was a big part of the setup for that Nick Foligno overtime goal. He was the one that was diving, and the puck directed off of him. Like, if he didn't dive at that particular moment, didn't block the shot, that would have never happened.
Well, Columbus just became a much tougher, and they were a very tough team to play against. I mean, when I saw them play Toronto 4 times, they were a tough team to play against, and now.
Sorry,
was it 8-1?
Just dawned on me what you said there. That this is actually a trade within the division, because I don't even think of Columbus as a divisional opponent, but this is a within division trade.
Yeah, and they're going to have Nathan Horton hopefully back completely, and now you add Horton and Hartnell to the team that essentially pushed the Penguins to 6 games. I mean, I think they took a step in the right direction.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Hard not to say that.
Now their focus obviously is going to turn to signing Ryan Johansson, and I'm sure they'll get that deal done within the next month.
Yeah, and this will probably help that. So a couple other things I've heard. I was listening to today and just over the weekend. Milan Mikhailuk, who we talked about a long time ago, as a UFA to be. I heard interest from Nashville and Phoenix on this player. Two fits that kind of make sense. I know Laviolette is a fan of his. I can see this one. Kevin, what are your thoughts on those two teams?
Well, the last time that I talked to Brian Murray, he was still hopeful he might get that done.
Right, okay.
But, I think there are a lot of options for him just because there's just not enough scorers out there. But Nashville does make sense in that regard. Although I've been told from a pretty good Nashville person that they're not expected to do much in free agency. That they're kind of hopeful that a healthy Pekka Rinne is sort of going to be their big change this season. If you look at their cap situation too, they made a lot of moves last year, and none of them really paid off. Dahlberg didn't really become the player they wanted him to, and Hendricks ended up getting traded, and Cullen and so forth. So, but Mihalik will have his suitors because he's goals and he's not all that costly.
He's young too.
Yeah, and he's relatively young. If you can get a guy under 30, and as a UFA, you're always pretty happy.
Which brings us to Paul Stastny, who's another under 30 UFA.
I think Phoenix makes the most sense. I mean, his brother Zbynek Mihalik plays there. They're losing Radim Vrbata as a UFA, and he would sort of plug in right at the same, probably the same price point that Vrbata was making with Phoenix. So I would put them at the head of the list. It adds up.
Vrbata leaving Phoenix is equivalent to Gabrick leaving LA to me. Like if I'm Vrbata, I would stay in Phoenix. I mean, it just seems like that's where he has the best success.
Yeah.
He just seems to fit there with the system, and he gets the most minutes.
He does, but the Coyotes are not the Kings in terms of winning. I mean, he's been there, he's watched it. He obviously doesn't feel like they're on the verge. Like next year is going to be the year. Because I don't think
Ooh,
go ahead.
Ooh.
Go ahead, Josh.
I got really breaking news. The Montreal Canadiens have re-signed Andrei Markov to a 3-year deal, apparently.
Well, there you go.
Any money?
I don't see anything yet, but I'm looking for it.
I mean, that's big, but are we stunned by that? I don't think so. I mean, he's an important.
Yeah.
And I thought, I guess people thought that it could fall apart, but he's still pretty valuable, and I'm sure there are some sad teams around the NHL who were going to bid for him.
We're thinking about him, yeah. I mean, just today, it's funny. This is typical for me, because just today I had heard that the Penguins were suddenly very interested in Markov, and so this is I should learn by now.
5.75 cap hit.
5.75
cap hit, yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Sometimes it takes another team to be interested in a player to get it done too. So that's what you always have to find.
I think he was aiming for $6 million, so that's obviously a little slight compromise. But I think it's interesting that ring the bell. You've got 3 defensemen on the market that are over 37 years old: Willie Mitchell, Dan Boyle. And of course, Stefan Robida, who broke his leg in the playoffs last year. I think there are a lot of teams who are going to be more interested in those guys on a 1 or 2 year deal rather than signing a Matt Niskanen. Now, I'm not saying they'd rather have Robida than Matt Niskanen, but they think a lot of teams out there would rather sign a player for 2 years and get what they think they're going to get out of him than have the unknown factor of signing Niskanen for $6 million or $6.5 million for 6 or 7 years and be stuck potentially with a contract that's a little hefty, and you don't know what the player is going to end up being.
And Markov was healthy, finally. But that's a big risk, is he going to stay healthy or not?
Right.
But he was healthy and was big for them in the playoffs. Although had times when in the playoffs where he was a bit of a defensive liability for them too. So, but you're right, Kevin. It's not really surprising. It seems like one of those things Montreal had to do, and if there weren't defensemen out there and. Again, getting players to play in Montreal sometimes is tricky as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on you there, and but I think the fact that they did as well as they did in the playoffs, that says they're closer to winning the cup than maybe they thought at the start of the year, and they're also I think I don't think it's out of the question they're going to get Gianta re-signed as well. I know a lot of people have them on their list as being an unrestricted free agent, but I think there's a chance they'll get him done.
Do you think that's a smart move, though? I mean, in reality, I mean, I thought Gianta was has really lost a lot in my mind.
Well, I talked at length about this with his agent the other day, and I've talked to some Montreal writers about it and some other GMs, and everybody says the same thing. He's not quite the player that he was before, but he's still essentially a 20-goal scorer, and and he's still popular in the room. Guys still like him. He says the right thing. He does the right thing. And it just depends on the price. Like what I was told is if his price is right, the Canadians want him back. If he wants too much, they'll thank him for his services and let him move on. I mean he will certainly have, because of his leadership skill and because he can still be a 20-goal scorer, he'll have a lot of teams that will be bidding for his services. But I have a feeling. I just had a feeling that they're going to get it done there.
That would make. I mean, it would make sense. He's the captain of the team, obviously, and an unpopular player. But he also really slowed down in the playoffs. He had. I don't think he had many points at all in the playoffs.
No, I didn't like him at all in the playoffs, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I was the same way, and that's sometimes an older player, who does run out of steam. A little bit of a Yager-ish thing that we've seen in the past too. Where that's what it looked like to me. An older player running out of steam in the playoffs. But we'll find. I mean, we'll find out soon enough. But I think that there probably aren't that many options. You're probably right. Or places that would value Giannis, or one of those situations where Giannis is probably more valuable to Montreal than he is to other teams because of what he brings.
Yeah, no, that could be true. But you start to look around. Like, it's not like they don't have other players who are capable of being captains on that team. At least I think they do. I mean, Plekanec, it's a possibility. Also, why not Markov?
Right.
On a short-term basis.
Yeah,
So.
and he's been. Yeah, exactly. Another player I keep hearing tied with them is, as I said before, is Jussi Jokinen tied with Montreal. And Montreal is one of our teams today, so we should just start talking about Montreal because they were the team that we spun. We had Montreal and St. Louis today, oddly enough. So yeah, so Montreal is, we're talking. We've already gotten into a little bit of this. Obviously, Markov signed on our queue, which was nice of them to do. And then Alcianta possibly is another player, but this is okay. Montreal, the Montreal Canadiens. Just a quick review. They obviously went to the conference finals. They've extended Michel Therrien for 4 years. For some reason, I'm not.
Maybe because he did a good job.
Okay, tell me how.
I'm
sorry. Yeah, I've done too much Michel Therrien. It reminds me too much of Pittsburgh and the same thing that they did there. And I just, again, let's just get off of Therrien because I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. But they have some. They have some young players up and coming. Let's see who they've got signed here. What's their biggest need in your mind, Kev? We'll start with you.
Well, I like their defense quite a bit, and I love their goaltending. I think a healthy Carey Price obviously would have made a big difference.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's up front. I mean, I still think they got to get some bigger, stronger guys. Guys who are playoff style of forwards, guys with more grit. Clutch goal scorers. Pacioretty was great during the regular season, but there were times when obviously he was MIA in the postseason. So you just need to find those guys that can figure out how to score goals in the playoffs, and that's not easy to do because it's completely different in the playoffs, as we've been hearing for years. But it's definitely the truth.
The big advantage that they have right now, in my mind, is that, we talked the other day about a team, the Wild, who have a lot of guys on entry-level contracts, and Montreal, who are making impacts. Montreal also has a lot of impactful guys on entry-level contracts when you look at their team. Gallagher is an entry-level contract still. Yeah, he was a huge player for them in the playoffs. I was really impressed by that kid. Galchenyuk's an entry-level, and Bourneval's an entry-level contract. So there's 3 players, 2 of which are arguably in their top 6. 6 forwards. So, they couldn't score in the playoffs very well, but a couple questions there, obviously. And 2 of Therrien's outcast players that are really making a lot of money, and Rene Bourque and Danny Briere.
Mm-hmm.
Rene Bourque both had big moments in the playoffs, but both still couldn't get get more than like 6 minutes of playing time in the final game where they were eliminated. So that's me as thoughts on anyone thoughts on what they would do, what they should do with Tarion and Renee Bork. Renee Bork's name's been mentioned a lot, and I've even heard it said that he has asked to be out of Montreal.
Well,
Mike?
as I theorized with the Buffalo Sabres having $20 million at least under the cap floor, that a Danny Briere move to Buffalo would add up. I mean, he's loved in Buffalo. They're probably looking for a couple of veteran forwards to A, fill up some cap room, and B, be a good influence in the locker room. So I wouldn't be surprised if that eventually happens. But overall with the Canadiens, I mean, they're set with Carey Price in goal. They have an interesting dilemma with whether they can trade Peter Budaj to some other goaltender, because Tokarski seems to be I think could fill the backup role with the Habs next year. They have a ton of free agents on defense. I don't think they're going to re-sign Douglas Murray. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring Mike Weaver back, because he played very well for them down the stretch. They have a couple kids in Nathan Beaulieu and Jared Tenorti that they want to get into the mix. I think they need to add a forward. I really think they need to add a forward of some impact. I don't know whether Mark Bergevin is going to do that via trade or if he's going to sign a free agent. I don't know if there are that many impact forwards in free agency and you're going to overpay for them. But the big thing, the encompassing thing is PK Subban.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? I mean, that's
I think he's going to make $8.5 million. I think he could push towards $9 million, and then there's the question: do they want to pay anybody that kind of money? I think they will eventually, but I wouldn't be surprised if he holds out.
Could we see another holdout, Josh, you think?
I think there's a good possibility, but Montreal knows that PK Subban is very valuable to their franchise.
Yeah.
Would they give him $8 million a year? I don't know.
He's worth it. I mean, I think he's worth it. I give it to him.
If Dion Phaneuf's being paid $7 million a year,
right, exactly. I mean, Kevin, how high would you go with PK Subban?
Well, I think they may have to go that. I mean, I think there is sort of a cap established with what Crosby is making and Malkin. They're in that 8.7, 9.5 range for both of those players. But everybody knows that you're not going to let Subban get away. So, quit fooling around. It's just a matter of, he wants to be surrounded by talent too, so he's got to be careful. You can't push for too much.
Well, that was the thing. Yeah, I agree with you. And also, PK was not only their best defenseman, he was their best offenseman at many points last year. I mean, he plays all over the ice. He's a 200-foot guy, like he's everywhere.
Yeah, well, and he's good in the dressing room, so maybe he's about a 230-foot guy.
There you go.
30 steps to the dressing room.
That's right.
He'll get talking to us as well. So,
That's
yeah, I mean,
tall.
yeah, he's
pretty tall, yeah.
Yeah, he does it all, essentially, and there's no perfect hockey players. Like I'm always amused that when I get the readers that talk about, well, he makes mistakes. Well, like everybody makes mistakes, and otherwise there'd never be any goals scored. And he's a great player. Basically what they got to just call him in the room. I always enjoyed the stories of the negotiations with Nick Lidstrom. Ken Holland has told this for many years. Go in, he'd lay out his salary cap. He'd explain to Nick, what he was trying to accomplish, how much money he was going to give to other players, and then he says, "Okay, Nick, tell me what you need." And
that's awesome.
That's kind of what I would do with Subban. I'd bring him in and say, "Look, you're going to be you're going to be our guy. We're going to build around you, but we got to build another team. This is what we got going here. This is what we're paying everybody. You know what our situation is. What do you got to have?"
It makes sense to me. I mean, he's so vital to that team and their success. I mean, more so maybe not more so than Carey Price, but beyond that. I mean, and yeah, and Kevin, you're right about Carey Price. Had he not gotten injured, what would have happened? I think that would have been really fascinating to see.
Yeah, but see, I think he's even more valuable than Carey Price, and not that Carey Price is not a great goalie, because I'm really bullish on him, but a lot of teams have great goalies, so the difference between Price and the other great goalies isn't that significant.
Right.
But there are not a lot of great defensemen, and they got Subban. He is a rare guy. He's in the top 5 or 6 guys in terms of making an impact. So the difference between him and the top defenseman on some of the other teams is fairly significant. So I can make a case that he's even has a bigger impact than the goaltending.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you. So they've got a lot to do. They've got some money tied up in some players. I wonder if we could. Have they done their compliance buyouts? I'm not sure that they have done either of them. I don't remember them buying out anybody compliance-wise. I can't think of any.
I can check on that.
Yeah, but we'll see. Our other team we wanted to talk about today was the St. Louis Blues. So that was, and the Blues are an interesting team too because there's interesting. They were the Blues were a team that ran away with the league for most of the year last year. Then suddenly got very cold at the end of the year, and then in the playoffs came pretty darn close to knocking off the Blackhawks and ran into a really tough. They really got. Everything would have changed if the Blues had finished, ahead of the Anaheim Ducks. It's how the whole Western Conference played out. I think would have been different if if that hadn't happened the way it happened. But instead, they didn't, and they had to face a really good team in the first round and went down to them. And then suddenly the talk was that the assistant coaches were fired, and Hitchcock is on the ropes. And they were a great team last year. I don't get this. Kev, start with this one.
Well, yeah, I agree. This goes back to what I said before. The difference between Umberger's an important part of Columbus, and he's a big guy in the dressing room, and then now suddenly he's out the door and they don't need him and everything else. Well, it was the same thing on the Blues. The Blues were the hardest team in the league to play against. Hitchcock had made them into just a monstrous force. And then suddenly down the stretch, they couldn't figure out, how to lace their skates up. They had all sorts of trouble. And, to me, what I noted in watching them against Chicago, there's a difference between being hard to play against and then understanding what it means to close the deal. They couldn't close the deal. Like, if you remember, they had all sorts of shots on goal and they were getting their scoring chances. They just didn't know how to close the deal. And they couldn't figure out, and the Blackhawks, that's an athletic ability. They know how to survive in those situations, and, they knew how to finish series. And that's, I'm afraid to say this, but that's really a coaching thing. You've got to be able to somehow instill in your players how to get it done. And Hitchcock was unable to do that, which is surprising given he's a veteran coach.
Yeah, is it coaching, Mike, or do you agree with the coaching thing, or is it? I've always thought this is more of like a sniper thing. Like I think there's some players who are just finishers, and that was one of the reasons I think they were looking at Hartnell when they were here.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about finishing scoring. I'm talking about knocking a team out of the playoffs. They were guilty of both. They had trouble finishing, and that's not a coaching thing. But I think the ability to close out a team, to make changes on the fly, I think that is a coaching thing.
Well, I still think that, and it's a lot of people forget that they went into the playoffs last year really seriously injured. A lot of their players were nicked up in the last week or two. They got the first 2 games against Chicago, and then didn't, as Kevin, you just said, they really didn't have the finishing glow to be able to beat the Hawks. Now, going into this year, they're not going to bring back Ryan Miller. Apparently, they're going to go with Jake Allen, the AHL goalie of the year, and Brian Elliott as their tandem. Their defense is pretty much going to be the same. And their focus appears to be to get a number 1 center to put Backus into more of a secondary role, second line role. And if they can make the deal for Spezza or Kessler or Joe Thornton or somebody out there, or if they have enough open cap room to sign Paul Stastny, which I don't think they do, then I think that they can reach that higher echelon like Chicago or LA, but I think they need more offense, and from the center position, if they can do that, then I think they can go to that next step.
They actually have quite a bit of cap space. They've got $21 million, almost $22 million, and at the same time, they have 18 players signed, so that's not bad. It's not bad for them. Josh, you've got something on Hartnell?
Yes, James Myrtle from the Globe and Mail and TSN is reporting that Hartnell asked for a trade out of Philadelphia.
Oh.
So if that is indeed correct, it would make more sense that deal happen. Two teams that want to trade their disgruntled players.
Yeah. I didn't hear that from talking to people today, so I'm kind of surprised if that is the case. But I know, like I said, if that's the case, it's probably because the coach and he did not really see eye to eye on things. So that is always possible. On St. Louis, though, the other thing I wanted to throw in here as well was, they are really set with they've done some really smart. Armstrong has done a good job, I think, at cap management. A really good job. I think he's one of the better in the league. And having Pietrangelo and Bouwmeester tied up for the next, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, basically 6 seasons, that's $5 and $6 million a piece. That's an amazing thing. So they can do a lot because of that. And they've got Shattenkirk tied up for 3 more years. So UFA wise, they've got Steve Ott, who I know they're trying to bring back. I know a lot of teams have interest in him too. So he's going to could be tricky to bring back, but they have plenty of money. If they want to bring back Steve Ott, they can.
Well, I think there is a difference between, they're not a cap team, so
right.
Their budget, I don't know what it is, but
yeah,
I'm sure it's not the cap.
Right.
So they may not have room under their budget, but their defense is one of the reasons why I think they're really comfortable playing with Jake Allen. Is in my mind, they have the most talent on the defense than any team in the league.
Yeah.
They're a very talented defensive team, and goal scoring wasn't really an issue during the regular season. They got enough goals. They just don't have a lot of natural scoring ability.
Right. I agree.
They got to work hard to get their goals. So they could really just use a very skilled player. And I think, if Backes suddenly becomes your number 2 center, then suddenly they do become even more scary because he's a pretty good player, as we all know.
Yeah. And Tarasenko is one of those natural goal scorers, but he's up and down with them. He's one of the few people they have who seems to have a natural skill for it. But he is very inconsistent, still an entry-level contract. So,
Montreal did use both of their compliance buyouts, one on the immortal Scott Gomez, and the other on the equally immortal Thomas Caberlet.
Wow. Well, yeah, there should be a compliance buyout Hall of Fame. Those two would be in there.
Gomez for sure would be in there.
I think Caberlet's the only one who was bought out twice. He was bought out by, I think he was bought out by Carolina, and then he was bought out by. No, he got traded. He got traded. I'm sorry, he got traded.
He's an absolutely great guy. Caberlet is a great guy.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, he is. And so, speaking of which, we're at 3:00. We're going to find out who is going into the Hockey Hall of Fame with you, Kevin, this year. What are some thoughts on that? In your opinion?
There's some obvious choices. Dominik Hasek, is certainly a first ballot Hall of Famer, as is Peter Forsberg. Peter Forsberg, during his the height of his career, was the best all-around player in the game when you took into account defense, offense, passing ability, and he also, I tell this story all the time. I remember the playoffs one year when he elbowed Bob Probert. Now, I covered Bob Probert his entire career. Nobody elbowed Bob Probert. And the funny thing about it is I interviewed Bob Probert after the game, and he was totally impressed by Peter Forsberg for elbowing him. He basically said, nobody elbows me, but Forsberg did. And the reason he did it is because Bob Probert hit him when he was vulnerable. And he just went back at him just like he was a normal player. So Forsberg is deserving. I think Mike Modano should be first ballot as well. Yeah. I give him a little extra boost because he's the greatest American forward of all time. Not the greatest American player, but the greatest American forward of all time. And plus he was a 500 goal scorer, the leading scorer in American hockey history. And then it comes down to a battle between Lindros, Jeremy Roenick, and there's going to be other guys out there too. I'm just forgetting a few of them, but. One of the issues is this is sort of the golden era. A lot of great players are coming up at the same time, and you were there when I was talking to Jeremy Roenick, and Roenick was, when we talked about it, he basically said that there are a lot of great players that are up at the same time, and it just makes it difficult.
And it would be so appropriate for Roenick and Modano to go in together. That would.
He did finally admit, they were rivals since they were 10 years old. They played in the Quebec Pee Wee tournament against each other. They played all the time against each other. And in his book that I did with Roenick, he basically said at the end of the book, Modano won. You know, he was the better player, and he just readily admitted that you know, when you look at it, you know, he just lasted longer and played at a higher level for a lengthier period of time.
Guys, the interesting thing I find with Lindros is Bobby Clark now is obviously in the voting process, and surprisingly, Bobby Clark has been a big supporter of Lindros going into the Hall of Fame. I wonder, because if Bobby's now on the board with the voters, maybe Lindros has a better shot at going in. Other players I think should be going in. I think Mark Recchi should be going in. For the kind of career he had. And obviously Phil Housley, Dave Andreychuk are there as well with Rob Blake.
Yeah,
wow, okay.
I think all those guys, you know, Andreychuk especially, with what do you have, over 600 goals. I think he'll eventually get in. You know, and I've had arguments with people who don't think that this guy should get in. I think Curtis Joseph should get in. I know he didn't win a Stanley Cup, but his career totals are pretty excellent, and I would, you know, being a follower of the Maple Leafs for a long time, I would like to see Cujo in there. I also hope that the Hall of Fame rights a wrong this year and gets Pat Burns in there, because him being passed over a couple times has just been, I think, an embarrassment.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, like, you can't even understand that.
Yeah, you can't even understand it. I agree. Hopefully this year's. I mean, last year they did it with Fred Shero, who I thought should deserve to be in there earlier too. So hopefully they'll get both of them in there this time around. Lindros or Roenick is a really tough, interesting debate that we could go on for a long time about.
The one thing I would say about Lindros' candidacy is, you know, I was on the Hockey Hall of Fame committee several years ago. You know, you serve a term and then you move off, and you know, one of the things that I often talked about is you ought to be able to say his name and feel like he's a Hall of Famer. And, you know, Lindros was such a dominant player when he played. Like, he was such a force that, you know, when he was in a game on the road, when I would travel, like, there'd be a buzz about playing Lindros. And I think that weighs in his favor. Like, he wore the black hat. You know, he was a villain in every arena. Everybody knew who he was. You know, he was just a huge personality in the game, and I think that you have to take that into account.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, Lindros, to me, he's one of those few players, and there's only been maybe a handful. Forsberg was one too, who, when you're at the game, you're literally waiting for their next shift. You know, like we're watching the game, and you're like, when's his next shift? You just want the next shift to happen, and that to me is a Hall of Fame thing. That's what I've always thought of. And you know, and he was, like you say, I mean, he was the best player. Both Forsberg and Lindros had their moments there where they were the best player in the game, I thought.
And there's a precedent with players whose career were shortened, and we know that Lindros' career was shortened by the concussion problem. You know, Cam Neely's his career was shortened. If you go to in the NFL, a guy like Gale Sayers made the Hall of Fame, and his career was very short. Kirby Puckett in baseball. You know, Bobby Orr, of course. But I'm just saying that there is a precedent for players whose careers were shortened to make the Hall of Fame, and I think Lindros eventually will make it.
Yeah.
Bure as well.
He already made it.
Right, there you go. Josh, to you, and then we're going to close on up.
Yeah, I just want to get Kevin's thoughts on, we haven't talked since last week, what happened, what's going on in Pittsburgh with the rumors that the Penguins made offers to both Peters and Desjardins, and both guys went to a different team instead. I want to get your thoughts on what's going on in Pittsburgh and what direction they might go now.
Well, you know, I've said all along I thought the best fit was Ulf Samuelsson, and I still believe that. Like, I think has the type of personality that would work well with that veteran group. I think he has paid his dues. He's been, you know, an assistant coach in both New York and Arizona. And when he was there with Wayne Gretzky, you know, Wayne Gretzky was not your typical NHL coach who came in at 6 o'clock in the morning and broke down film. He had a lot more responsibility. He was almost like an associate coach. And then he went to Sweden. He got head coaching experience. So I like that fit a lot. And The only other guy that I could see, and this, to me, this almost feels like a long shot, is Ron Wilson, who would be good for a veteran team as well. But I don't know. I still think I think Ulfie Samuelson would be a better fit there. But it is interesting that you have a high-profile team that didn't get their first choices for coaches, and I wonder if it's just because of the pressure of that. The expectation is, Desjardins takes over a team that's we don't know where they're at. Peters takes over a team that if you get into the playoffs, you're doing good. You come into Pittsburgh, you better be a contender next year.
Yeah.
I mean, they're expecting you to win the cup like next year. Especially if so. There's just a lot more pressure on going there. So you got. You basically going into Pittsburgh, you got to take the team they have with maybe a couple of changes and win. In the other two places, you're going to be able to sort of change the roster and make it fit the way you coach. So I think that's the difference there.
And what happens with Baalsma now? I mean, obviously, he interviewed for 2 of the jobs, at least we know of, the Vancouver job and the Pittsburgh job. Oh, sorry, 3, and Florida. Or not Pittsburgh job, 2 jobs, sorry. Florida and Vancouver. Obviously, he wants to collect the money still from Pittsburgh.
Well, and the other thing, too, is he needs to be patient. There's really no reason. Like, he's a Stanley Cup winning coach with a winning personality. He was a star on 24/7. Everybody remembers that. Why jump at he wouldn't take less money than he thought he was worth. And, there's going to be other job openings. Peter Laviolette, waited, and he did fine. I mean, the Predators is a good job, and there are other coaches who have also waited and done fine as well. Doesn't always work out like Bruce Boudreau, who gets fired on Tuesday and gets hired on Wednesday.
Right.
It just doesn't always work that way.
It doesn't go that way. All right. I think that's all the time we have. We want to spin the wheel real fast to see what we're going to talk about tomorrow. And Toronto and Anaheim. There you go.
Oh boy.
You're morphing up tomorrow. So.
Yeah, there you go. All right, guys.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. I still won't like Phaneuf as a defenseman tomorrow either. So.
Okay.
Any award predictions for tonight, guys?
Award predictions. Kevin, you got to not be part of that one. Award predictions for tonight. I don't know.
Well, I don't. Even though I'm president of the writers, I don't know who won.
Oh, I thought you did. I thought you might have known. I wasn't sure.
I don't know.
Okay.
It's sort of like the Oscars. We have the accounting firm of Ernst and Young. So I don't know who actually.
Okay. All right. Well then, let's let's.
I predict one of the 3 nominees will win.
Okay.
I'll predict McKinnon will win the Calder.
Yeah. McKinnon winning the Calder is pretty safe bet.
Yeah, that seems pretty safe. I think Duncan Keith will win the Norris.
Yeah.
He was of all the guys, I thought he was the most consistent start to finish. Shea Weber had incredible numbers down the stretch, for sure, and Chara's Chara, but I thought Duncan Keith was good, throughout the whole regular season. So, and we all know Crosby's going to win the Hart. So.
Yeah, he's going to win the Hart for sure. How about the Vezina? Who are you thinking on the Vezina?
Well, the GMs do that, so I have no clue.
Wow, there you go.
Tuukka.
Mike, what are your thoughts on the Vezina?
Tuukka
Rask? All right.
Yeah.
Very possible.
Who were the finalists for the Vezina?
Rask, Carey Price, and
See, I'd say Price. I'd go with Price.
Price might have been the player of the year. I was thinking about
this game. I like this game this year until he got hurt, obviously.
When I did that, my quick we got to go, but my player of the year blog where I was saying who was the best player in the regular season, Olympics, and playoffs. Price might have been that. I was thinking about Price was up for that. And if he doesn't get hurt, really could have won that. Drew Doughty, obviously, a lot of people thought he was that guy. But yeah, Price had a heck of a year. I mean, but I know the Olympics don't count in this one, but he might not. Doughty might not win any. Doughty won't win any awards either, and had a heck of a year. So there you go.
Actually, I'm gonna correct myself here because I did up because I wanted to make sure the finalists for the Vezina were Tuukka Rask, Varlamov, and Ben Bishop.
No, Price is not in there. Sorry, I should have done that. Anyway,
That was my fault. That was
then
my
I'll
fault.
go Rask.
yeah, I guess Rask is the guy then. All right, guys, that's all for today. We'll see you tomorrow. Hopefully, we may have some more news tomorrow. I mean, maybe the dominoes are starting. We'll find out. We'll find out soon. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. Talk to you then.